Hello, scorekeepers. Welcome to episode 5 of Minnesota Opera's podcast, The Score. On this week's episode, we'll unpack our complicated feelings around the verdict heard around the world before putting Derek Chauvin in the rear view forever, hopefully, and turning our attention to the incredible art and artists in our community, which means we have our first guest. We'll be joined by Emilia Mettenbrink, the incredibly talented and black violinist who started the Tiny Balcony Concert Series, a series of musical experiences from her home that managed to unite a community, even in the middle of lockdown. And then, of course, as always, we'll send you out into the weekend with a PB&J, a moment of pure black joy. You know what time it is. It's time to check the score. Let's do it to it. All right, scorekeepers, we're back. Episode 5 of The Score, and it's an exciting day, y'all, because we have our first guest.
Yay!
Isn't that amazing? Somebody actually wants to join us. Growth. That's what you call that. It's growth. Beautiful. Yeah, so we're so excited to have Emilia Mettenbrink joining us later on in the show. She is an amazing violinist. She plays for the Minnesota Opera and the Minnesota Orchestra and all sorts of places. And, she is here to talk with us about her experiences as a Black woman in classical music and being a Minneapolis native and all of the craziness that has happened over the past year here in our community. And speaking of which, last week? Because it feels like it's been...
What?
I don't even know. Obviously the three of us have been living here in the Twin Cities, which also I want to, as always, acknowledge that we are on Dakota land. But it has been a roller coaster of emotions for everyone here in the Twin Cities. And last week, we learned that the jury convicted Derek Chauvin in the murder of George Floyd on all accounts. And we were not here last week to discuss that, but here we are today, about a week and a day past that verdict. And I don't know, y'all, how are y'all feeling?
Well,
crickets. I'll add a cricket sound effect.
Complicated, conflicted. I'm glad for whatever relief the verdict may have given some people, and grateful for a chance to exhale a bit, but also a little concerned about some of the conclusions people were drawing about what the guilty verdict for Derek Chauvin means for the system overall. So a mix, a storm, hurricane of emotion. Yeah. How about y'all?
Yeah, I mean, the same kind of, right? Like, it's a huge relief that he was not acquitted. And, it was an interesting moment to kind of reflect on this while at the same time understanding that, another 6 people of color were killed by the cops
I mean,
in the intervening days. Like, all of them unarmed, and several of them extremely young. So it
Yeah.
wasn't, I don't know. I guess that's my contribution to the crickets moment. I don't know what I'm feeling. I'm still trying to process it. It feels like, you know, a bit of progress on one front, while at the same time feeling like we took 6 steps back in the same week. And it's just a lot to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, I think my sentiments really echo both of yours. I feel a measure of relief, especially for Mr. Floyd's family,
Yeah.
that they were able to just have that moment where, you know, finally, our justice system, as deeply, deeply flawed as it is, in this moment was able to give this family that conviction. I think is just so lovely, and I think about all of the families that have not gotten that over the last 400 years. And, that brings sort of a measure of, peace, I feel like, just to sort of my heart. But at the same time, it's just like, in the moment, I think that the part that really got me was when the judge sort of started to go down the line asking the individual jurors, is this your, judgment? And, they all said yes, 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 going down the line. And that's the part that kind of broke me, and some tears left my eyes, because it was just seeing something I'd never seen before. And then for that to be like followed up immediately by Micaiah Bryant's murder in Columbus, like literally, like, as the verdict is being read, this young woman is being shot in front of her home as she's trying to defend herself. And then in the next few days, just seeing another one and then another one in North Carolina, Andrew Brown and Virginia, and just all of this sentiment that seems to be in the air, that's like, okay, well, the justice system got this right, so now they're going to, continue to get it right, and we don't have to worry anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, sweetie, that is not how this works at all. And then to see like Nancy Pelosi out there being like, thank you, George Floyd, for being murdered, so that, justice your name will become synonymous with justice. Like, I think to your point, Paige, sort of some of what people are taking away from this is just like wild.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like I kind of feel like I'm in the same boat as you all, that like, it feels so complicated, and that I have not quite sorted my feelings about it. I'm happy that he was not acquitted, and that we don't have to sort of clean up what that mess would have been, but there are still so many other messes to clean up, and it's just so huge and so systemic that it's it boggles the mind.
The reaction to I won't say certainly not everyone, but a lot of the conversation around the murder of Micaiah Bryant specifically was upsetting. Just what happens when, someone isn't the quote perfect victim, I guess. And, the rush to try to criminalize a black girl who was really trying to defend herself from everything I read. Who, I mean, who of us did not go to, okay, well, maybe you went to a fancy high school where people didn't get in fights like that. But most of us went to a high school where fights happen. People, like, it's a part of growing up. It's like, it's a thing that happens, unfortunately. and just that she could be trying to defend herself.
Yeah.
And calling for help, actually, and instead be killed, and all the people rushing to say it was justified because she was holding a knife. What is a knife to a gun?
Right.
Don't we literally have a phrase called "Don't bring a knife to a gunfight"? Like, we have a common phrase that clearly we understand they're two totally different things.
And we've all seen West Side Story. Teenagers have been fighting
Right.
with knives since time immemorial. I think the difference is when it involves like a group of, white boys, then like we all
Yeah.
break out into song.
Right.
Just keep it cool, boy.
I feel like that's just like a part of being a teenager. They all choose violence at some point. Like, we know that's what happens. So
Yeah.
it's like part of adolescence. Like, you might get in a couple tussles. It's just what happens growing up. And that had to end her dying is just, yeah. It reminds me of like a specific kind of disregard and like lack of protection we have for Black girls specifically.
Yeah.
Especially Black girls.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's this way that sometimes I really think about the dynamics of how people get acquitted in cases like these, and the number of times that something has happened where the justification has been it was a Black or brown person who may or may not have had a weapon, but I was afraid for my life. The number of times that is recognized as being a suitable, appropriate mitigating factor to some heinous act, it's just shocking, right? And the fact that we haven't spent more time as a society trying to unpack what is it that's so scary about us to people? You know what I mean? And like, not to get on a distant tangent, but, the number of times where I would read these cases where a straight man had been acquitted of killing a gay or a trans person out of, a claim of being afraid of someone coming on to them, right? Like, and that again being considered some kind of a mitigating factor for these decisions. And it's just like, what is really going on in this country that people are even okay with the idea, I was scared, so I killed somebody, and therefore there don't even have to be consequences to that action because the person who I killed was so scary, so fundamentally outside of the mainstream that this is somehow justified, just out of my fear. Like, that's the piece that I get stuck with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it reminds me of that, I believe it's a Nikki Giovanni poem, where she's talking about there's a spider in her home and she just sort of reflexively reacts to it and kills it. And then the last line of the poem is about how she was feeling so much guilt, and actually, like, I don't think it's actually like okay to just like kill something just because you felt a moment of fear.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's actually not a justification for taking anyone's life, even a spider. And it just... But, it's hard for me, especially in the case of Ma'Khia Bryant, to see that as sort of a justification, or Adam Toledo, or any of them, but like specifically in Ma'Khia's case, because, I mean, he was on the scene for what, a couple of seconds?
Yeah.
You see the body cam footage? Like, I don't understand how you could possibly assess a situation in that short amount of time.
Nope.
And then justify it as you were scared for your own life or someone else's life. It's two or three teenagers, like, in a fight. Go in there and break it up.
Yeah.
Actually do the humane thing. And go in there and figure out what the actual problem is. Because I assure you, the solution to the problem isn't that, like, a 16-year-old girl's life has to end.
You know, I was reading today that Rudy Giuliani's home was searched by federal investigators. And it came after the former mayor being under investigation for months. Months and months and months have culminated in a warrant to search his house. However, seconds can pass and suddenly it's okay to shoot a black person, right? And I appreciate that these are apples and oranges for a lot of people who are listening to this podcast, but it's just the idea that with someone like Rudy Giuliani, even to go into his home, right? Just to go into his home, you want to clear X number of legal hurdles. You want to make sure that you have given yourself every kind of coverage under the law. But when it's a matter of taking the life of a young black or brown person, like it's a thing that no one has to consider for more than a second or two. And, you know, juries historically have been very comfortable with only deliberating for a few hours and determining that someone was justified in making this act, right? So, you know, even with the small bit of progress from the Chauvin trial, like it just left me thinking about how broadly unequal things in this society are, just all over the place, from small things to massive ones. Yeah.
Well, you know, one thing that I saw that sort of disturbed me in the aftermath, and, you know, sort of bringing it back to sort of an earlier point that we were making, that, you know, in the aftermath, we had all of these, you know, officials, elected officials, politicians coming out and talking about, you know, the George Floyd Police Reform Act and how that needs to be passed by Congress. But apparently, you know, I follow a lot of, you know, I'm from DC, so I follow a lot of journalists, you know, and sort of political quote unquote insiders or whatever on Twitter. And one of them was saying that, you know, they had spoken to a number of congressional aides off the record, and they were saying that, yeah, you know, they're going out there and they're saying, like, we need to pass these laws or whatever, but, like, in reality, for them, the urgency has been greatly reduced with this verdict in order to change things, because, like, we can make the argument that the justice system worked the way that it was supposed to, and it will continue to do so. So we can just sort of, you know, this isn't the most urgent priority on our plates. And I feel like, you know, that brings up, like, so much just, like, agita for, like, me, like, especially, like, in this work that we do around equity and inclusion here at the opera, not to, like, call out the opera, of course, but just this idea that I had just sort of in general, like, now that, like, sort of the Trump era, quote unquote, is quote unquote over, which, you know, it very much is not, as we all know. The Ted Cruz's and Josh Hawley's of the world are still out there being monsters.
Still got their jobs.
Still got their jobs. But one of the fears that I had was that, like, you know, EDI work would become less of a priority for companies everywhere, just because it's like, okay, well, you know, Trump's not in office anymore, like, talking about, you know, Mexicans are rapists and grab them by the P word and all that business. So, like, we don't actually, this isn't as urgent anymore. And just to sort of see that come to fruition, because even in conversations I've had with certain folks, like, very well-meaning, nice, you know, woke-ish folks, you know, just being like, okay, well, now we can rest easy. Thank goodness, you know. And it's just like, I don't understand that. I don't understand it. It's like, you know, like seeing a house on fire, and it's like, well, we put out the kitchen, so, you know, don't worry about the bedrooms, it's fine.
Yeah, I don't know who you're talking to, but it does sound mighty white of them.
I figured that was understood. The white is silent.
Yeah, I'm also reminded of some things I've seen. First, let me say I'm very grateful for white folks who take on the labor of gathering other white folks so that we don't have to. If that's you, bless you. Keep doing it, please.
You have our permission.
Please, permission. We urge you. We strongly urge you. That of just breaking a post I saw breaking down like some typical, I guess, very very white and unaware statements that people are making of the time right now. And one of the things that I think I've encountered a lot is, especially in multiracial spaces, a lot of centering of just like individual white people's self-improvement, and talking about how can I be better, or how do I talk to this family member or friend. And it's just interesting that's still where we're going in just how we have these conversations. I mean, it's one thing to like start centering, a white person's self-improvement in a multiracial space where, you're talking about current events. That's already problematic enough to, not be centering the most marginalized in the room, but also that, we're still bringing it back to this individual thing and not like a huge, like massive collective effort that we need to change. Like in all the suggestions of self-improvement, or should I do this or should I do that, or how do I talk to my racist Mima, like all of it's still, what I don't hear enough of is, how can I maybe be helping people who are running for office, who have a really progressive view or progressive vision for my city. What about organizing? Organizing gets a lot of things done. I want to see more white people organizing themselves into coalitions or whatever you need to bring about some type of like bigger communal change. Like that's one of the biggest things I see like continuing to be perpetuated, and in the way people are viewing the guilty verdict also. Like this individual, we can point to this individual case of this individual officer being convicted, and we'll just take that as great. We're doing good, and like wipe your hands, take a rest, we're fine. And we really have to get away from that.
Yeah, just this idea that like it's all these like isolated incidents instead of like this giant systemic issue that affects all of us. I think it's like this fundamental misunderstanding of race and racism and how it works, especially in this society, where it's not about your feelings. Mm-mm. It's not about like how you feel or relate to this person. It's about these huge, just like structural barriers that have been placed in front of people of color for centuries that we all are a part of, that all white people, no matter how you individually feel about the individual black person who's sitting in front of you, benefit from. And so what it's going to take, yes, like you said, is collective action, that we all have to like start like thinking about that. And I guess it's just like this sort of like Wild Wild West American manifest destiny ethos, like all about like the individual white dude like going out there and settling land that's already occupied, and making his own way and pulling himself up by the bootstraps. It's just sort of this American ideal that we all just like resort back to this idea of like the individual, and it's the individual's matter, or individual's feelings and actions that matter, when it's like, no, like this is just this giant problem that's not going to be solved by like one person like sitting down and like having like a conversation with Mima at Thanksgiving. Like like it's
Have y'all heard of Facing Whiteness? It is an interdisciplinary project at Columbia that was funded by Mellon while I was still there. And I believe the person who ran the program is a sociologist named Peter Bierman, where, among other things, there were hundreds of interviews with white people around the country, white people of different ages, and it was asking them lots of different questions about how they understood their own whiteness. And the thing that was so interesting, most of the people who were interviewed, and again, it was hundreds of white people of different ages around the country, really showed no real connection to whiteness as a thing, right? And, you know, we have talked on this podcast specifically about feeling black, what feeling black means to each of us, how it shows up into our identity, and why we feel the need in different spaces at different moments to identify, you know, quite intentionally as black. And it's interesting to both of your points around why maybe you don't see more of the ways the conversations with our white counterparts going from something like, hey, here is sort of like moment of ideation around my personal responsibility or how I am personally affected by race, to then something that speaks directly to collective action to make something happen around that. And it actually seems like there is something about whiteness that like almost blinds individuals to the like larger set of forces that they are participating in and that they benefit from, right? And we talk a lot about people just actively not understanding their own white privilege. And part of what that appears to be, I'm no expert in it, my degrees are in blackness, but part of what it appears to be is like an actual sort of misunderstanding of the fact that lots and lots of white people are going through exactly the same thing, and that they can come together and sort of move things by linking their individual experiences. Like that individualism runs so deep that it actually runs counter in a lot of instances to people just making a kind of a choice to do something as a group in the ways that I feel like we as people of color in this country are absolutely conditioned to want to sit down with other people of color and find things that we can do collectively to shift things. And it's like that moves in completely the other direction. And I feel like where we're getting to see it a lot are these campaigns right now where people are trying to move folks on the right towards getting vaccinated. It's like that, again, that sense of individualism, it's sort of blinding people to whatever kind of potential for collective good that could happen simply by people coming together and saying, we all share a common interest. I find it really interesting, as much as I find it alarming, that it's like these pieces don't connect for a lot of people in our society, which is why I think we end up in these places where we have major issues and then seemingly no means of solving things like the gun violence problem, where everybody just sort of wrings his or her hands and then, you know, kind of throws them up in the air, and, you know, there's nothing we can do. We just all agree that we have a problem. Like it's very curious. It's a weird thing to observe in this country and to try to make sense of.
It is really strange. And I like I always wonder if it's like a thing that's changed over the years too in the US. If like, are we becoming more just individualistic, or is this just like always been a function of whiteness. It probably has been in some way, but like to the extreme that it is now. Like I think about like, you know, the like Rainbow Coalition, and what like Fred Hampton of the Black Panthers, Chairman Fred, was doing, and like people of different races and ethnicities who had organized amongst themselves and realized, hey, we have some really messed up conditions. Even white people, like white Appalachian people, that a lot of folks would just say, oh, they're just rednecks, like had organized themselves. And then organize with Black folks, with Puerto Rican folks, that, hey, we actually kind of all have the same messed up conditions. Like, we should collectively do something about it. So I'm gonna go talk to my people over here. You talk to your people over there. And you talk to your people, and then we're all gonna come together. And like, I hope that things like that can still happen. But it takes like it really takes a certain, like, I guess, willingness to just forgo individualism in order to do that.
Yeah. And sort of a baseline belief that maybe this sort of like collective good actually is beneficial on some level, right? You have to wonder if part of what makes it so complicated for folks is that a lot of people just don't actually believe that it is better, that there are any solutions that may exist in sort of this coming together. And it's really astounding until you overlay this behavior on American history and you kind of see the ways that it's allowed a lot of challenges to either recur or just never be solved even a little bit in the first place.
Well, I suppose one of the things that is sort of giving me a bit of hope in this moment is some of the collective action that is being taken. You know, especially among artists and artist communities, you know, amazing things like Black Table Arts and Million Arts Movement. I know, Paige, you were just at Black Table Arts this past weekend leading a workshop.
I was.
That's amazing. That's so cool.
Thanks for mentioning it. But
yeah,
I feel like low key, more like high key, artists are always leading the way in this moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, not just me, not me, but many others, and like across movements in history. So, you know, it's kind of appropriate that I feel like sometimes are people going to be like, why are they talking about this on an opera podcast? And like, I did not come here for critical race theory. I just came here to hear y'all talk about Verdi or something. Like, but I mean, it's true that like artists have always been part of this. The arts have always had something to say. So, yeah.
There you go. And I am super excited to see what artists have to say about this movement going forward, and what who Paige, who says that quote about it's an artist's job to make the revolution irresistible.
Tony Cade Bambara.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
And I really see that as our job. So I guess hopefully moving forward, we can put sort of Derek Chauvin in the rear view. We won't put all of these issues, obviously, in the rear view, but we can put him in the rear view and move forward and just start talking about some beautiful art. So I think, right? And so I think the first step is our wonderful, incredible interview with the amazingly talented Emilia Mettenbrink. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with Emilia. All right. Welcome back, everyone. We are so excited. We have our first guest. I know I keep saying it over and over again, but I'm just so excited that somebody wants to be here and join us and talk to us. So today we are joined by the incredibly talented Emilia Mettenbrink. She is a violinist with the Minnesota Opera Orchestra. She's also a principal second violin of the Sphinx Virtuosi, and she's a Minneapolis native. So in addition to her work with Evan Opera and Sphinx, she often plays with the Minnesota Orchestra, St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, all sorts of places. And you may know her because in 2020, she began a concert series from her small balcony in St. Paul, appropriately titled the Tiny Balcony Concert Series, which has just provided a lot of just relief and joy to folks during this ridiculous pancake breakfast that we have been dealing with for the last year. So we just want to welcome Emilia. Thank you so much for joining us on The Score.
Woo!
Yay!
Insert applause track here.
Absolutely. I have to figure out those sound effects. So how are you doing today?
I'm good. I already got my yoga practice in, so I'm on the right frame of mind, and yeah, it's sunny out for the first time in
like
a while.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Amazing. well, before you joined us, we were actually having a chat just about, we're about 8 days removed from Derek Chauvin and the verdict and all of that. And so just as, a Minneapolis native, I think all three of us are relatively new to the area, but as a native of this city, I was just, curious, what has it been like, the last year and the last couple of weeks as a Black woman, as an artist in this community?
So I should preface that not only am I a native of Minneapolis, but my childhood home, where my mother still lives, where my father lives, where I grew up, is a block away from George Floyd Square.
Wow.
And so that day, I live now in St. Paul with my partner, and I heard the news that day and then saw it, of course, like everyone else did. And immediately was like, my dad, just like, Dad, is he okay? And I called the house, and Mom was like, we don't know what's going on, and everything is crazy over here. And so it was super heavy. I mean, I've heard it's not the first time. No, we all know that it's not the first time something that like that has happened. But this was like, when people say it hits close to home, like this was literally, that's where I caught the bus in the morning to go to school. Like that's where I bought gas when I started to drive. That was like my home. And so it felt really, really heavy and scary. And then those next few days were very tumultuous. I don't know if you guys remember, but well, of course you do. It got really crazy with the protests and people coming in from out of town to kind of hijack those protests. And so our neighborhood advisory over in that Bryant neighborhood, they had advised that everyone, maybe stay up or try and, hold vigil, somebody kind of stand watch and, put garbage cans away. So there were places to light things on fire, things like that. And so my mom is an older woman now. And so she asked me to come over, and I spent 2 nights not sleeping at my mom's house, like sitting on my front steps, asking people to leave who didn't belong there. And, holding hands with my neighbors, almost literally, to keep each other safe from outsiders. And so that was, I've never thought that I would ever have to do that for someone, especially not my mother. And it made me so appreciative of that home that she made for us and how safe I felt there growing up, because for a moment that safety was like threatened. And so the whole rest of the summer was in and out of those feelings of like, am I safe? Are we all safe? Is this what happens next? Like, it just felt like this constant feeling of doom isn't right, but just like something might be over here that I need to make sure I'm, accounting for in all of my whatever I'm doing. And I became pretty vocal on my tiny balcony concerts, telling people that it matters if you have those signs in your yard, and like us people of color, it does make a difference. I feel safer in my community. I feel more accepted in my community if I see those signs of unity from my community around me. So that was something that it made me want to speak louder and to speak to that, even though I was supposed to be just playing happy music from the trees, I suppose. So yeah, that's how that felt to me. It was just like, I can't be silent any longer. Not that I was silent before, but yeah.
So was that part of the inspiration behind starting the Tiny Concert series? I mean, I guess for people who don't know, maybe you could just explain a little bit about.
So last summer was weird, y'all.
It was.
Starting from the beginning. So I got done with the Sphinx tour. Sphinx Virtuosi got done with tour on March 11th. And they literally dropped me off at the airport at like 3 a.m. in Utah and said, bye-bye, and we'll see you in a month, because we were supposed to play with the Minnesota Orchestra. And I came home. I went immediately from the airport. My partner picked me up, dropped me off at the Opera Center for my first opera rehearsal that morning to start at 10 a.m. And I was 5 minutes late because yay. And then by that night, we had all received messages from the opera staff saying, nope, not going to do that anymore. And everything's finished. And COVID was the new life. And I already said I teach yoga, and I went to teach my yoga class on Saturday. And then on Saturday evening, we all got called into the office, either virtually or actually in person. I happened to be teaching, so I was there, and the manager said, we're closing the doors. And so then there went my like Zen happy second life. And I was like, oh my gosh.
I mean, that must have been terrifying.
Yeah. And then Monday morning I woke up and I had an ear infection, or what I thought was an ear infection. My ear hurt. And I was like, that's strange. And I went to the Minute Clinic, because we live in the great state of Minnesota, and you can just go and they check you out, and they gave me some antibiotics, and I thought everything would be okay, but it wasn't. And my ear kept hurting and hurting worse. And I went back in, and they didn't know what it was. And then I went back in again on Sunday and was like, listen, something's really wrong. This isn't right. I'm losing my hearing at this point. And thank goodness for this beautiful nurse at CVS on a Sunday morning who was like, I think that this other thing is wrong, and that's why you're feeling the way you are. And she gave me some meds and said, but you need to call the doctor, because I can't really do what I should do, because I'm not a doctor. So you have to call your main doctor in the morning. By Sunday night, I didn't have any feeling or ability to move the left side of my face. It was drooping, like I'd had a stroke, and I couldn't hear it all out of my ear. And I was terrified.
Oh my gosh.
So turns out in the ER on Monday morning, I had shingles, and it had infected the inside of my ear. That's where it had decided to live, and it attached itself to the nerves that control the left side of my face and had paralyzed part of my body.
Oh, God.
So yeah, I was I had MRIs, and I was on lots of fun medications, and it was as scary as life could be for a violinist who all of a sudden couldn't hear. And oh, by the way, I couldn't eat because I would drool, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. And I was like, it lasted for like a month, and I saw a lot of doctors, and then I started to feel better. And as you can tell, I can smile with both sides of my face again. So that's awesome. But it took about a month. And so at the very end of April, I hadn't touched my violin in a month. And I was like, I wonder if I can still play. Like, that was weird. And I wonder if I can hear and what that's going to sound like, because my ear was all affected and whatever. And so I just one night walked out on my balcony and was like, let's see if I can play Bach, because I don't even know if I can play Bach. And I kind of told my next door neighbors, like, I'm going to go outside and play, and please listen, because they're on the board for the opera. And so I was like, just so somebody's listening. And they texted me afterwards and said, oh, that was great. And the neighbors on the other side said you should do it again. So the next night I did it again. And then the next night I did it again. And then someone on Nextdoor, that beautiful app, to keep your neighbors safe. Somebody posted like, oh, I saw this violinist and I was walking my dogs and it changed my day and it made me feel so much better. And I was like, I think I should keep doing this. So I just kept doing it every night, except when it was raining. And that lasted until July. And then I was like, I don't think I can play every night because I'm running out of stuff to play. And so I went down to 2 nights a week and I started inviting my friends. And one night my girlfriend who's a ballerina was like, hey, can I come and dance? And I was like, yes. And so she came and danced one night. And then by the end of the summer, I was doing like mini ballets on my sidewalk with her entire ballet company. And yeah, it was wild. All because I thought I wasn't going to be able to play the violin anymore. So there you go.
That's so cool though, that like something that like came out of a really like harrowing experience and like sounds like a moment of like desperation of like, oh snap, can I still play this instrument I love, then turned into like something that was beautiful medicine for a bunch of people.
Yeah. People kept thanking me and I would have to tell them like, first and foremost, I have to tell you, I did this for myself because I was afraid that I wasn't going to be able to play anymore. And I'm so glad that it's healing for others because I would probably be doing it anyway.
So, I just think back to April 2020 and none of us knew what was going on. No. And it was just all so scary. And like, the air is poison. Stay inside. Like, what? Oh, okay. So to be able to just give that gift to so many people during such a scary time, I just think it's such a beautiful thing. And that it's transformed into something so amazing with so many gifted artists. It's just like, it's so cool. So, I'm curious, I mean, where are the tiny balconies now? Where are we going to continue with it? Are we hoping to continue with it?
We're crossing both of our fingers and our toes and all the things that we can cross. I applied for a grant through through U of M to partner with community, and I'm waiting to see if that grant was approved or not. And I have a bunch of like plans in the works and I'm kind of practicing anyways, just assuming that they'll say yes and we'll figure out the details later. And I've partnered up with the YWCA over here and the Martin Luther King Community Center that's right by where I live. And inside that, there's something called the Hallie Q. Brown Center that does like a daily school program for underprivileged kids and after school stuff for people who don't have childcare options. And inside that same building, lo and behold, is the Penumbra Theater, which is just as luck would have it. So I got to work with Penumbra as well. So it's turned into kind of a lot of mini projects and possibilities. And I'm just hoping that I can, obviously I'll play on the balcony in any case, but I just don't want to spend another summer asking my friends to do their great work for free. And so I really want to pay my artists the way I would expect to be paid myself for my efforts and my craft. And so I just hope that I can, give people what they're worth so that they don't feel like, not that they do, I think they're happy to play, but I just, it's been a whole year and none of us have had much of anything. And I don't want to add to that struggle or that burden. I want to help make it feel whole again.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
One of the things that that's been like a huge takeaway for me as a very new arrival to the Twin Cities is how much creativity and creative energy there is in this region. And I'm curious if you could say a couple of things as a Twin Cities native around why there might be such fertile ground for the creation of world-class music here, because it's not just that there are a lot of people who are creators of music, but it's that they're also really gifted musicians, right? So what do you think it is about this town that breeds that?
Well, first of all, I think, for a long time, the Twin Cities is kind of a well-kept secret. Like, since when do you have a city of our size with two, not one, but two major symphony orchestras and like three major art museums? And, the Guthrie has won a couple Tonys. And so like, we're not coming from a space of like a mid-sized town with one orchestra, which would be great. I mean, that's a great place to live. We have this kind of base of awesomeness. And so as someone growing up in Minneapolis, I always felt invited to appreciate that. Like, it would be impossible not to, like,
Yeah.
it's this invitation because it's all around you. And I think this might be changing now a little bit, but when I was growing up, everyone had to learn a language in school. Everyone had to learn an instrument in school. Those weren't options that you could opt out of. Those were just like, yeah, you're going to learn how to do these things because we think that they're important. And it's kind of something that was built into the magnet program of the public schools in Minneapolis, and the way we fostered a lot of community here in Minnesota. It's kind of one of those things. And it might have a little bit to do with the fact that we have to be inside for something close to 7 months. It gets cold and we can't be as outside as we want to be. So I think that also fosters a feeling of like, how do we create community? How do we share with one another in different ways? I know growing up, for me, it was like Prince, and the underground hip hop scene of Minneapolis is so vibrant and is so full, and just so many opportunities to kind of see and hear people do things. So, and as soon as I see that in others, I think it always creates that feeling of an invitation for you to do it yourself. Like, I think artists are the first ones to be like, hey, come join us.
Right.
So yeah, do your thing.
So I'm curious. So, you mentioned, having to play an instrument in school. Is that when you first picked up the violin and realized that you had such a love and talent for it?
No, my mom's crazy.
Oh.
She started me on the violin when I was 3. So about the
Oh my
time that
goodness.
I could like fully walk and run, I was also learning the violin. My mom was a single parent for a little while, and she was in a babysitting co-op with a lot of other moms in our neighborhood. And they would, you like pass the kids around so like somebody could have a day off. And one of the other moms in the babysitting co-op had a daughter who was like 3 years older than me, who played the violin and took from a teacher in the area. And it was just kind of one of those things. My mom is such a hippie nerd, and she was all about the like, how do I make my child's brain grow? And this other mom was like, oh, if you put her in music, like it flexes this muscle in the brain and she'll learn better and she'll this and that. And my mom was like, okay, without knowing really anything, and just kind of shoved a violin in my hand and shoved me in the same classroom as this other girl and was like, there you go, try it out. And then didn't give me the option to quit for like 6 years. Figure it out.
Well, it worked out, seems like.
Yeah. So it worked. I actually didn't end up doing a lot of music in school because I was doing so much music out of school. So though my friends were all in music and orchestra and band and what at school, I was doing like youth orchestra and private lessons and all these other things. And so they would, thankfully, by the time high school rolled around, they would let me skip high school orchestra so that I could go to this other orchestra thing, or take another class, which, yeah, my mom was into that too. Yeah. Use your brain.
Well, especially as a woman of color, as you continued on, what were some of your experiences as you sort of moved into sort of a professional career in classical music? Have you experienced, I mean, I think I probably know the answer to this, but, what have some of your experiences as a person of color in this particular world been like? Have you found yourself ostracized or embraced?
Both. I think I was very naive, very, very, very kind of sheltered until I got to college of like what was out there in the world. My mom was a single parent, and then my sister's dad moved in with us and kind of just instilled this idea that like you do whatever you want if you work hard at it and figure it out for yourself. And I never believed that there was something that I couldn't do. But I remember being in college and kind of being newly aware of how different I was than the other people around me in the music school. I went to the University of Michigan. So there were tons of African-American people at the school, but even then I was not like the vast majority of them. The closest thing I could get to someone who had spent that much time getting good at something that they really liked was like somebody who was pre-med, and they were, you know, at least 2 to 3 years older than me and in a completely different genre of life. And so it was enlightening. It was scary to realize like, okay, my colleagues in the music school are not like me physically and haven't had the childhood that I have, because I grew up in a pretty diverse and Black neighborhood of Minneapolis. And then to move into the kind of that white space. And then on top of that, notice that if I were to seek out Black colleagues, I was other there as well. Because I remember the first time I heard the word bougie, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that that's how I would be titled. Like, that's not something I'd ever choose for myself. Like, if you saw my upbringing, where I came from, you wouldn't use that word, but like, because of who I had chosen to be as far as a violinist or like a smarty pants or whatever, somehow that put me in this weird category that was, and somehow negatively. And I didn't understand that for a long time. And it took me a long time to find like people of color who wanted, or I felt like wanted to be friends with me or wanted to hang out with me or felt like they knew who I was. I joined a lot of mixed groups on campus, like as many mixed ensemble creative folk that I could find. I would kind of collect them along the way. And as far as like being a person of color in the music school, yeah, it was at Michigan when I had my first like moment of like, you don't belong. I had someone tell me that I was only there because I was because of affirmative action.
I've heard the same thing.
Yeah, like as if I checked some box for the school. And yeah, that was weird.
It's like, actually, no, because I'm brilliant. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, no, like I'm just like smarter than you, but like, okay.
You know what's it's interesting because I think as musicians, we come to the space, especially a learning space, with more than enough humility, with more than an abundance of like, I need to learn, grow, and be self-analytical. So in those first greener moments of me being like, oh, you don't think I belong, there was a part of me that listened. There was a part of me that was like, I need to try harder because maybe they think I'm not good enough, and maybe they're right. And I've struggled with that most of my career, trying to prove maybe to myself as well as to others that I do belong and I can do this as well. And I'm what you see as some innate ability in me. Gosh, that's something that I love how as soon as they see the talent or the skill, it's like some gift from some outer force. It's not that you like worked your butt off for years and years and years and spent hours in a practice room day after day trying to perfect this thing, but that you were just gifted from God, which is part of it, of course, but like, it's my ability to hone that skill that makes it useful and valuable to the world.
Right.
So yeah, I remember auditions where people would be like complimenting my equipment as the reason that I had played very well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Someone told me that I must have a really old Italian bow because my spiccato was so wonderful. And I said, no, actually, my bow was made 2 years ago, but I spent the last 6 months working on my spiccato. Thank you very much. So there's always that. I mean, you spend enough years at it and you realize that it is you, not the thing. But yeah, it's been weird along the way, for sure. All kinds of moments.
Well, yeah, you know, somehow we are it always seems as though we are endowed with some sort of magic.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Not to be cliche.
The pixie dust. The pixie dust above my head.
Yeah.
So since part of our professional function is asking ourselves the questions very regularly of what more do institutions need to do to support artists like you in a more robust way during your career. So if you're thinking back to either your time at Michigan or subsequent to that, what can people like Rocky and Paige and I be doing to be in better support of your work?
I mean, it's hard because you and Rocky and Paige are people I kind of look up to and admire for your work in the same industry. So I don't think that you're good examples of what needs to happen in my end. Like, I wouldn't choose you and be like, do this better. But there's a ton of things I would say about the industry in general that could be done better. I think that it's important that when we cross boundaries, when we get to a place where, you know, the first African-American wins an Academy Award, or the first, that we mark those even on the smallest of scales. So like when Philadelphia Orchestra hired their first African-American musician, they had a party about it. It was on social media, it was on the news, it was like they said something to the world because they knew that it meant something. And I think that I think people, sometimes organizations shy away from that because it looks like tokenism, or it can look like tokenism, but I think it is also so important to celebrate the moments where you can see change happen.
Yeah.
To celebrate beginnings, because it can turn the entire organization in a new direction on purpose, instead of just letting it be an accident. Because if it's an accident, it might not happen for another millennia, and that would be horrible. But if it was indeed something that you're really proud to say, then maybe you move in that direction on purpose again, sometimes sooner rather than later. So I think it's important to take those moments really seriously and celebrate them internally amongst the organization itself, but also externally, so that the community around knows. One of the things I realize about Minneapolis is there's this huge community of people that love music, and half of them don't know that we have this thing over here called the opera, and you can go and you can get really cheap tickets, and they don't feel any, and if they do know that it's there, they don't think it's for them. And I want for it to feel like it's for them. And if one of those ways of making it feel like it's for everybody means like showing them who's in the room who looks like them as many chances as we get, I think that's where you start, you know, saying like, and we are doing this, and we are doing this other thing, and we're going to play on a street corner. And because I think the more we stay in our box and act like everything happens because of the talent, and I've got my eyes closed and I'm not paying, then we miss out on these moments to acknowledge the change that we want to make. And hopefully we all want to make that change, but you know, on the surface of it, we just need to like acknowledge it when it passes us by. I wanted so much for orchestras back when George Floyd happened to like play something of an African-American composer and say it out loud, and go and seek. Don't sit behind your art, but sit next to it, or maybe in front of it, and say like, this is what we want it to be, not what it was 200 years ago. Because that's what invites new people to the hall, not like, I'm sorry, but you know, sometimes Mozart doesn't speak to you as much as look at that girl with curly hair and brown skin, and she can do that thing.
Right.
So
Absolutely. And it's just it's the way that we're going to continue to just sort of evolve and stay alive, is, you know, if at some point, you know, like we're out there, we're celebrating, you know, that someone like you is in our orchestra playing the violin and we're being super public about it and super excited about it, then there's going to be like another young girl who is like, oh, well, I was curious about this oboe thing. Let me pick it up and try it. And then all of a sudden you've got like the Serena Williams of oboists, you know, the next generation, like carrying the torch and carrying us into like a new century and a new millennium. And that's so exciting to me, that we could potentially create this, you know, new, exciting, huge, vibrant, artistic community, and keep it going, long after, you know, we're off this planet, and that, you know, Black people could be a huge driving force in that is just like so cool and exciting. So
Yeah, I think we miss the boat as classical artists. We could learn something from our sports colleagues, you know, about what it means to take away that fourth wall at the front of the space, you know, to invite people in. And like, would our industry benefit from, like, I don't know, cards, like little baseball cards, or like, you know, to highlight people and their skills and their differences. And, you know, I always kind of play with that idea of like, if we could make it feel like, you know, these are people that you could revere and also feel the same as, like, if those two things can sit at the same table with one another, then do we create a different conversation about who belongs in the space and who gets to listen to the music and who gets to feel like they understand whatever it is.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, I can say that I'm probably here right now and decided to enter theater because I saw somebody, my own sister in high school, on stage in drama club in like the school musical Cinderella, and I saw her playing one of the evil stepsisters, and I was like, that is so cool. She looks like she's having so much fun. I'm gonna be in theater when I get to high school. And I just knew that like my whole childhood, and I did it, and now here I am. And she's not even in theater anymore. She's a musician as well. But yeah, like it's because I saw it. Like I saw her, and I saw someone. Luckily for me, it was someone that I knew also, who happened to live in my own household as part of my family. So I was like, I can definitely do it, and I'm going to. Yeah. Like, what if we could just have that happening more often with classical music in general?
Did I ever tell you this? I had like the same experience with my older sister.
Really?
Yeah, and she's 15 years older than me, and so I was 3 years old, and I remember she was playing Hamlet, and for some reason my parents decided to take a 3-year-old to go see Hamlet, but
I mean, why not?
Yeah, why not? It totally made sense. But like, I just remember her like being on stage in the costume, like with a sword, you know, just like acting her butt off. Like she actually won an award for that performance. And like, I just was like, I want to do that. I want to do everything that she's doing right now. And so, you know, like your sister, she's an accountant now. She still loves Shakespeare. But yeah, it was one of those just formative moments that like I'll never forget. And so if we can make more of those moments for more people like us, like it's just amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To sit on the other side of that is amazing too. Like, I played a concert a couple weeks ago for Penumbra. They were doing a special event to hold space for the beginning of the trial. And it was all people of color, all people connected somehow to Penumbra Theater. And, you know, this woman was a healer. She did like yoga and all that, and she was speaking. And then there was a doctor speaking about some other issues regarding, like a psychologist doctor, and then someone else, and then the artistic director of Penumbra. And then I played, and we're all on Zoom in different little, you know, as we are now. And I'm playing, and I see this little girl next to the doctor. Her daughter must have been all of 5. And when I finished playing, you know, I mute my screen and I go back to a listening perspective, and comes up in the chat, the doctor, she writes me, she says, my daughter is sitting here next to me, and in the middle of your performance, she tugged my arm and she said, that girl has curly hair and brown skin and she's playing the violin. And I was like, that's why I'm here. Like that's it. I don't need anything else from this evening at all. Like that's everything. Like I was almost in tears. Like that's all I need for the night. And it is continually that experience of like telling someone else without saying the words, yes, you belong and you could do this too. And this is also an option. And if you feel like, I don't know, whatever your passion is, if I could give somebody the angle that like they belong in that, whatever their passionate space is, yes, all of those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, that feels enormous on both sides.
I'm wondering like how you came to like see yourself reflected in the music that you play, because I think a lot of folks think of violin or opera or anything that is associated with classical music, and they think, oh, it's just a bunch of music by dead old white men. And
it is.
I'm wondering, I mean, and yeah, they are.
I mean,
they're not wrong.
Honesty.
Yeah. But I wonder how you like came to like see yourself in it and like really, really connect with it. And even if there's particular like pieces of music that you just really like love to play that touch your spirit.
Well, I think what you learn the deeper you go into the classical arts is that, artists in general are a little bit troubled or tragic at times, like we all, everyone has a story to tell. And so I think along the way, I'm lucky that I had teachers who never brought a specific piece of music to me, or art in general, or a genre of music to me as like something that I couldn't connect to. It was never introduced to me as something that I was going to have trouble understanding. It was always this emotion is sadness, or, and I had teachers who would talk to me from many different angles. So like if they couldn't get to me in an emotional light, they could through color or through sound texture, or so it was like I found myself very early on not always being able, as a child and early teenage years, not being able to express myself through words, but finding that I could through music, finding that I could find solace or a place where music could interpret that which I could not get out of my mouth and make someone else understand. So for me, it was always a personal connection. It was always just like, this feels like this to me. And then I had teachers and colleagues around me who encouraged that, who never said like, no, that's wrong, but just like, okay, what do you do if that, like, how do you use the tools that or can you learn a new tool to like help get that across to your audience and share that. And then I love emotional composers. Like Shostakovich had a lot of hardship, and he was a bit of, and I'm not supposed to say this word, but he was a bit FU in a lot of his music. There's like this level of everything is wonderful, and then right below the surface it's like, and now I'm going to talk to the real people who really know what's going on, and I'm going to tell you how effed up this really is. And so there's this dual element, which I find somewhat homey to me. Like I know what that is. Like I know where those emotions sit. So I like that. And I like the tragic stories of people like Tchaikovsky and Bartok, and people who like struggled through life, had to deal with some things that up until a year ago, I didn't think I was going to have to deal with. I remember standing on stage 14 months ago and telling an audience like Bartok had to leave his home and like go to a different country because there was war and destruction and military down his streets. And then like this summer there were military down my streets, and I was like, gosh, I really know what that means now, to be that frightened. And wow. and I like sitting in that space and understanding through music what that what that does to your artistry and to the way you communicate with others. So I like the darkness. I'm a little bit, if you ask me the kind of music that I listen to outside of classical music, I like the darkness. Like, I love me some blues. I love me some like the dark side of jazz. Like, I love slow songs. Yeah.
Well, can I ask, because hearing that sort of gets me thinking about what do we do with our art when we are in those darker places, right? And I frequently think about moments like the one that we're in now, where we've been for the last, 15 or 18 months or so with the pandemic. What opportunities does a time like this present to artists who are politically minded, who may have something that they wish to say or do that is intended to move our society forward in a progressive way? Sort of like, what should we be doing right now? What are the opportunities that we have before us?
Well, I think what I've appreciated most from other people in general, other humans in general throughout this year, is when I feel them honestly speaking to the hardness of this. It's like not trying to cover it up with like, what do we learn? Or like, this is going to teach us this, or, the good part of this is that I get to spend more time with my family or with my dog, which is all right. It's all true. But like, to be honest, it's super challenging and it can be really hard. And our ability to sit with that and acknowledge it is sometimes more important than our ability to kind of grow above it. And so I find, like, I talked to a composer the other weekend on Facebook because he had posted this thing about like, why is everybody writing like slow music and sad music? And I was like, because it's sad. Like, we're sad, right? We're allowed to feel challenged and sad and frustrated and all those, like, it doesn't have to be happy all the time. You don't have to go at warp speed. Like, it's okay to slow down. And why can't we sit with that and be okay with that? So I want to sit in a space where, like, I love art that comes out of periods of history that are full, because it tends to be very accurate. You tend to be able to remember that, or other historical periods afterwards can look back on that. And the period in history is very clear and vivid because we spoke to all angles of that thing, because some of it was really hard and some of it was really angry and some of it was really happy. So I hope that art that comes out of this is something that feels like we want to be together and we can't. I want it to speak somehow to how much I miss everything. Like that feeling of longing, that feeling of disconnect from a person who is by all accounts an introvert. And I still feel like I miss the world. And I want that to come through in art. And so I guess what that means for me is, well, for me, it meant standing out on the balcony and like reaching out, because that was the hardest thing for me. I wanted to play and I wanted someone to listen. And so I reached out. And I think a lot of artists have done that. I mean, I'm not the first person to stand on their balcony. It was all over New York, and people were singing and dancing and all in the parks and in whatever. I'm certainly not the first. I won't be the last. But what it says is that we need each other. That I'm not playing the violin for me, or I would do it inside of my house by myself. And so I want it to be like, I wish more music and art would happen in the streets. Like, the best part about being in downtown Chicago on a Friday afternoon is like all the live art. It's not the shopping, it's the like drumming in the streets and people like dressed up in strange costumes, and like, let's do more of that. That's how we connect. And I don't think it should be always. I think the concert hall is a great space. Please, let's not destroy that place. But like, let's also do these things in spaces where we all live and breathe on a more regular basis.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing that's not making me sad is this conversation. But I know we said like 20, 30 minutes, but like, I mean, this was so good so I've enjoyed this so much. But before we let you go, Emilia, is there anything you would like to promote? I hear you have a concert coming up in St. Paul.
I wouldn't call it a full-length concert. What did I do with there it is. Can you see this?
Yeah.
So my friend, the ballerina, she owns a ballet company called Ballet Collaboratory, and it is exactly that. It's a collaboratory of dancers. So everyone in her company has a artistic role as a dancer, but also has a behind the scenes role, and they do marketing, or they help with development, or they help with ticketing, and they're interactive as a company. They are also one of the only companies in Minneapolis that has more than one African-American dancer at the moment. So she did that on purpose. It was a purposeful move. She wants to encompass the classical arts as being for all body types and all kinds of humans and all sexualities and however you call yourself or sit in the world, like this ballet thing can be for you too. And they've been working during the pandemic, and I've been helping them out, and they're doing their spring show finally outside in front of real humans again, which is great, instead of on the virtual stage. And she said the other day, we're doing an American in Paris, Gershwin. He's awesome. You want to play some like Gershwin on your violin before we start? And I said, sure. And so there's 2 concerts, June 5th and June 6th. They're on Como Dockside. You do have to get tickets. They are going to have like seats for you to sit in, and they mean their business. So go to balletcollaboratory.org and you can get tickets and things like that. But I'll be starting each show with a little bit of Gershwin, he wrote some preludes for violin and piano that kind of encompass some of his other music that came throughout the years. And then I'll do a couple ditties from Porgy and Bess that everyone will know.
Nice. Well, we'll make sure that we put a link in the show notes. So, make sure you go and you get your tickets and you check that out, because that sounds exciting. I love Gershwin. American in Paris as well.
Yes.
One of my favorites.
And it's fresh choreography. It's by a living composer, living choreographer, I should say. And yeah, I think every bit of it. I just think she's really cool. She's doing all the right things with her company, and I aim to support her as she aims to support me. So
support
Absolutely.
that. Absolutely. Well, before we let you go, is there anywhere, if anybody would like to follow you, is there anywhere that they can go, or perhaps people outside of the Twin Cities who might want to hear a little bit of the music from the Tiny Balcony?
Yeah, so I do have a website. It just went live. You can go to tinybalconyconcerts.org. I also have a Facebook page for Tiny Balcony Concerts. You can look for it under that name. Both of those places have videos and clips from things that I did last summer. You can see Sphinx performances on YouTube. There are quite a few of those out there now. I recently did a show in collaboration with my other artists from Minnesota Opera, and I think that's still live online, and you can still see that. So if you go to Minnesota Opera, they did a special on the orchestra, and so those are opportunities where people can see what I do or hear what I do. Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, I mean, thank you so much for joining us and talking with us for a few minutes. This was illuminating and wonderful and beautiful. And everyone out there, make sure that you go and check the links in the show notes to all of that good stuff. Emilia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. So nice to see your faces and share with you guys. Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll have to do it again.
Wonderful.
All right. We'll be right back. All right, and we are back, scorekeepers. That was a word? She is fantastic, isn't she?
Truly, yes.
Absolutely.
It was beautiful.
Yeah. I'm so happy that she was on. But, that could be our pure black joy for the week. But fortunately, we have other things that are making us happy this week. So, Lee, why don't you kick it off?
Why, thank you. So I wanted to share a little bit of news coming out of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. The United States has what is apparently its first ever Black Restaurant Week, which is celebrating Black restaurants across North and South Carolina. And it was organized by a brother named Juan Watson, who is originally from Jamaica, who has resettled in originally Connecticut, but now down in the Carolinas, and has organized this restaurant week, which is exciting because as a former New Yorker, one of the highlights of the year was Restaurant Week, which actually was like about 4 weeks over the course of the year, where restaurants in New York City would offer either some sort of a prefix menu or just pretty decent deals on their regular menus. And it was like a really big thing in New York because you were often able to get into restaurants like Jean-Georges or Le Cirque that you probably could not get into usually because they were so booked. So this is just a little bit of excitement coming out of the South, where the restaurants are probably quite extraordinary. I am actively missing barbecue food the last couple of weeks. One of the funny peculiarities of being married to a vegetarian. So I was super excited to read about this and encourage any of our listeners down yonder to go and have a plate of something awesome and text me about it. Let me know what I missed.
That is amazing that is the first one.
Right? I mean, you'd think somebody else would have been like, this is just a good idea, so let's do this. But even if it did take, 402 years, better late than never, and I wish I could be a part of it.
Oh, man, that makes me hungry. What I wouldn't do for some good barbecue.
Yeah,
Listen, I've been dreaming of it. There's I mean, it's not that you
some
can't
okay
find
places, yeah.
Right. But it's not like...
It's not the same as the man smoking ribs in the back of an old school bus like they do in PG County, Maryland.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's not as good as when you just pull up on homie with the sandals and the huge smoker and some empty lot and who's passing out plates for $10. It's just not the same. It's
not the same.
It's not.
We should get them a restaurant week. Well, that sounds amazing. Everyone, please go fix a plate for us.
Yeah, I'm looking at the website now, and it because I was like, what? How come I didn't know about this? And I guess it's a thing of just like different regions and different weeks. So you can go to the website Black Restaurant Week and see when it's coming to you.
Oh, okay.
Hopefully it's coming here.
When is it coming here? Does it say?
Is there like a Midwest section somewhere? Yeah, Midwest, July 23rd through August 1st.
Hey.
Okay, done.
There we go. I'm there.
And the Midwest is big-ish, right? So that's this part of the Midwest. It's not going to be like in Wisconsin somewhere.
I'm pretty sure they just mean the Midwest overall, because the way it's broken up, it seems like places that are like bigger, more metropolitan, or just have a lot of Black people to have their own week. There seems to be so like there's a Houston one, but then there's like all of like Northeast, for example, but then there's also New York City. So it seems to be split up between like regions versus large metro areas. There's even Toronto here.
Oh, wow.
Oh, okay.
So it's not just limited to the U.S.
I need to do a little bit of research, clearly.
Well, we'll have to take a field trip. We'll do a live remote.
Let's go on tour.
We'll just follow them around like the Grateful Dead.
Nah, because y'all can hear me smacking on the podcast.
Yes, we're grateful for ribs.
Today's Black Joy is crab cakes.
Yes. Yes. Lord. Well, mine is, like, I guess, kind of related because, like, you know, we've talked about, like, my sort of fitness journey lately. So, like, I probably shouldn't be eating all those ribs and crab cakes and things, but, you know. But so my pure Black Joy for the week, I really just want to shout out this company because as I have been sort of changing the way that I eat and, you know, working out more and all of that sort of stuff, you know, part of the whole thing is like getting new clothes to work out in. And so I really want to shout out this company. It's a Black-owned, queer-owned company out of Alabama.
What?
If you have been on gay Twitter at all, you will see that many of the gays have been shouting them out, support Black-owned businesses. MCE Creations.
Okay.
And their stuff is mad cute, y'all. Yes. They've got joggers, they've got shorts, t-shirts, underwear, if that's your thing. Just all sorts of just really cute stuff that, like, as soon as I put it on my body, I was like, oh, okay. Look at these yams. Okay, speaking of food.
Yes.
And I was like, I look cute today. Like, and you know, someday when I'm able to leave my basement and like go work out in a gym, I feel like thanks to these, you know, entrepreneurial young Black queer folks, whose names I wish I knew, but they don't seem to have an about section on their website. But in any case, I want to shout out them. Please go buy all of their stuff. Their joggers, their shorts are cut so cute. I've got 2 pairs of their shorts and a pair of their joggers, and I'm obsessed. I'm going to keep buying them. They will have just open access to my credit card. And it's but yeah, just go support them because like they're giving me joy every time I put on some shorts and go lift something heavy in my basement. So
Yes, I'm looking now. This is cute.
It's
Okay.
cute, right?
You about to be out here, Rocky.
I know. Doing my little Kiara Lachey workout in my little shorts. Yes. All eyes on these thighs.
Yes.
Yes. Well, Paige, do you have anything that's bringing you any Black joy this week?
That is a good question. I think there's lots of things that have brought me joy, but specifically, oh, you know what? Did I talk to y'all about Concrete Cowboy?
You did a couple,
Yes.
not on the podcast though, off the
Right,
podcast.
right.
Okay, well, let me do it here on the podcast because I'm still thinking about that movie and just how good it is. I guess this goes into 2 things. Follow the thread. My pure Black joy is revolving around just Black movies and TV and depicting Black people doing things other than being traumatized and and like in kind of ways that are like kind of niche but are absolutely part of the Black experience. So if you haven't watched Concrete Cowboy yet on Netflix, it is about the community of Black cowboys in Philadelphia specifically. It has people who are actually part of like these communities of Black horseback riders, Black people who love horses, who race them, who take care of them, who ride them around the city. People who are actually part of those communities actually act in the film as well and were part of the creation. But then it does also star like Idris Elba, and he was part of producing it because he wanted I read that he specifically wanted to support stories that uplift Black Americans specifically, and like the stuff that isn't told enough. I just thought that was beautiful. Another beautiful
really
aspect
is.
of it. Yeah. Like he's like, specifically, bring me those, bring me those. So I mean, I was a little Black girl who loved horses. I wanted one for a long time. My mom actually wanted to get me one, but it was just a little difficult logistically. So
I can see that.
but
see
this
that.
movie gave me life. And on a similar note, there's a anime coming out, I think maybe also on Netflix, about the Black Samurai who was a person
Yes, I
in
read
real
about that,
life.
yeah.
Yes, Yasuke. Yes, that is coming out.
With Lakeith.
Yes,
Yep.
Lakeith Stanfield is voicing the main character. That is bringing me joy. I haven't watched it yet because I think it maybe like just came out, or it comes out in a couple days. Either
Yeah.
one. But just yes to this like diversity of Black stories. I don't feel like watching us get harassed by police or racists. I can choose something else. Thank goodness, because sometimes that feels like most of what's out there, unless you just want to watch something older. So yeah, shout out to those two, and the diversity and multiplicity of Blackness. That's what's
Amen to
bringing me
that.
joy.
Absolutely. Amen. Well, we hope this weekend you all go out and you find your own pure Black joy. And of course that you join us in 2 weeks for our next episode. As always, thank you both so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, as always, it's been a pleasure. I love talking to y'all.
I know. It's the highlight of my week every time that we get to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, we're just so lucky we get to have our jobs and do this and get paid.
Yeah.
Literally, because it is our job, so it's a good thing we do enjoy it.
Yeah.
And for all of you all, make sure you check the show notes for all those good links. We'll provide links also to all the things we just talked about that are making us happy. And make sure that you give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, leave a review, share this with all of your friends and family and people who need to hear it. And I think that's it. Oh, and email us. Email us at thescore@mnopera.org.
Yeah.
And any questions, comments, concerns, I guess, let us know. Let us know what you're interested in, if there are any questions that perhaps we can answer. And we just look forward to bringing you all in and hanging out with you. So I guess that's it for now. Until we get to hang out again.
Until we meet again.
Yes.
Bye,
See you soon.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.